Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Seamstress and the Grave, a tale of Tabitha. I will tell you what no one tells you about mercy. It is not beautiful while you are doing it. It is plain, it is slow, and it aches in the bones of your hands long before you are old. I know this because I sewed. That is all I did. If you must reduce a life to its smallest truth, I sewed coats and tunics for the widows of Joppa, women who had no husband to buy cloth and no son to carry firewood, women whose names the city had already begun to forget. I did not forget them. I sat in a low room with fabric across my knees, and I pulled thread through linen until the calluses on my fingers were as thick as the leather on a cobbler's bench. No one writes songs about a needle. No one tells the story of a woman whose greatest labor was measured in stitches. But the widows came to my door in winter with nothing between their skin and the wind, and when they left, they wore what my hands had made. That was the whole of it. That was the whole of me. The fever came in the month the figs were ripening. I had been cutting cloth for Rivka, the oldest of the widows, whose coat had been mended so many times it held together more by habit than by thread. The shears slipped in my hand. I thought it was only weariness. By evening I could not stand, and by the second morning I could not lift my arms. The cloth lay uncut on the table beside me, half-measured, like a promise broken in the middle of a sentence. I was not afraid of dying. I had buried a husband. I had borne the weight of years without him, and I knew the shape of grief well enough not to fear my own. What frightened me was simpler than death, and heavier. It was the thought of Rivka in the cold, wearing a coat no one would finish. It was the thought of young Hessa, whose infant had no swaddling cloth because I had promised to sew it by the week's end. It was the knowledge that mercy, once it is taken up, cannot be set down without consequence. The hands others lean on become load-bearing walls, and when those hands go still, something collapses that no one else has thought to build. They washed my body on the third morning. I know this only because I was told later. I remember nothing of it. They carried me to the upper room and laid me on the stone bench where I used to cut fabric by the window light. And the widows came. They did not come to mourn me the way the city mourns its great men with hired voices and processions. They came carrying coats. They came carrying tunics I had sewn through winter evenings when the oil was low and my back ached, and I wanted nothing more than to sleep. They held them up to the apostle when he arrived, not as decoration, but as evidence. Each coat was a word in an argument they could not speak. Each tunic was a plea. Look what these hands did. Look what is lost. I cannot tell you what death was. I will not pretend I saw gates or gardens, or heard the singing of the departed. What I know is silence, and it was complete. My hands, which had never been still since girlhood, were finally still. The needle lay on the table where I had left it, threaded with dark wool, waiting for a hand that would not return. And then a voice, not a shout, not a whisper, a voice like a command given to the sea or to bread when it is blessed and told to become more than bread. A voice that did not ask whether I was ready, did not consult my weariness, and did not wait for permission from the grave. Tabitha, arise. I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was a man kneeling on the stone floor. His face was rough, weathered by salt wind and hard travel. A fisherman's face, not a priest's. He had sent everyone out. The room was empty of every sound except his breathing and mine, which had only just begun again. I understood before he spoke that he had been praying, not performing for the widows, not speaking fine words for the crowd. Praying alone, on his knees, in the way a man prays when he knows he has nothing of his own to offer. He gave me his hand. It was a large hand, calloused in the way that only working hands are calloused, scarred from rope and scale and the tearing of nets. I took it, and he lifted me to my feet. For a moment we stood there in the empty room. Two people whose hands had been shaped by labor, his by the sea and mine by cloth. Both of us instruments held in the grip of a God who finishes what he begins. He called them in. The widows came first, before the elders, before anyone who might have claimed importance. They came because they were the ones who had needed me most, and the God who raised me understood that. Rivka pressed her face against my shoulder and wept until my tunic was damp. She did not say anything fine. She said, "I thought I would freeze." That is what mercy sounds like when it stops being an idea and becomes a body standing in a room. A widow saying she thought she would freeze. Hesse held up the unfinished cloth. It was still on the table, still half measured, still waiting. I took it from her hands and sat down. They tell me that many in Joppa believed after that day. They tell me the story spread through the city like fire finding dry wood. I would not know. I was not in the streets telling it. I was in the low room, finishing Rivka's coat. Because that is what resurrection is for. Not for spectacle, and not for the one who is raised. It is for the widow who thought she would freeze, and for the God who refuses to let a coat go half-sewn when there are still hands willing to finish it. A single coat stitched in faithfulness is evidence enough for heaven. I know this now. I know it in my fingers, which are stiff again with age, because God gave me back a body that would continue to wear and ache and one day stop for good. He did not give me back my youth. He gave me back my needle, and that was more than enough. Selah.